Hello, everyone. I'm Ting. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And before I start, I wanted to get a quick photo that I can take back with me to home. This is a 3D camera. If you can all smile. Thank you. This is amazing theta. It takes a 3D shot. It's amazing. Thank you so much for having me here. And I'm going to share with you just a little bit of my learnings from the last few years, traveling mostly in Asia and in the US, studying innovation ecosystems. And hopefully it can be useful for you and integrating it into your beautiful city in Shibuya. So I want to just share a little story. My story starts in Detroit. How many of you guys know the city of Detroit in the US? Detroit's a very interesting city. It used to be in the 60s, the height, one of the most wealthy cities in the US. And the motor industry, the auto industry, which Toyota has a very interesting story with, basically collapsed in the 90s and has been in subsequent decline in the 2000s. And in 2013, they officially, the city filed for bankruptcy. And I was at the time working in San Francisco in the tech world and in corporate consulting, and not very happy. And I decided, I was reading in the paper about Detroit, and I just thought, all these artists are moving here. It's really interesting what's happening. I wanted something more purposeful in my work, and I decided to quit my job and to move to Detroit. And so my question when I moved to Detroit was, if this city that represents the old industrial model, it's failed. It's like an example of a failed city. So if that model doesn't work, then what's next? And so that was my question. And so I moved there and I started volunteering with an organization that worked with basically artists and makers. And as you know, Detroit is a city of a lot of makers. They know how to make things, cars and manufacturing, similar to Japan, I think. And I'll talk a little bit later about the project and what I learned from there. But when I was there, I met this man named Jeff Sturgis. And he's an amazing man. He was one of the founders of MakerBot. And he moved to Detroit for the same reason as me, and started a maker space that taught kids maker skills and a lot of the kind of underprivileged kids. And I was talking to him, I was interviewing him for my podcast, and he basically was sharing that a lot of his friends, from MakerBot and that whole world actually moved to Shenzhen and Asia and Japan and Vietnam. And I got really interested in that, and I said, what's going on there? Like, I didn't even know there was a maker culture. So I started looking online, and I couldn't really find anything. And so my curiosity just got to me, and I said, I have to go. I just need to go talk to these people, and I want to shake their hands and go into their garages and learn about what they're doing. So I did that. And so I embarked on this 4-month journey, and I visited 16 major Asian cities, 40 innovation spaces similar to this, and I interviewed with my partner 150 different entrepreneurs and artists and some activists and investors as well to get a sense of the ecosystem. And we reported on the ground 3 times a week on our own blog, just stories and profiles of some of the artists. It was amazing. It was an adventure. I can show you some photos here. Up in the left corner, that's actually Fab Cafe in Tokyo. And then on the right, we did a talk in an amazing group of incredible creatives in Shanghai. And a lot of these entrepreneurs were just so excited to share what they had created. And I was so impressed by the advanced, technologies that they were working on. I mean, like machine vision and all sorts of the same technologies that we had in Silicon Valley. So what I gained from this trip was really a lot of key insights that I think apply both to not only just, startups, but also our individual level and also a city level. And so today's the with the future of cities, I wanted to share these 6 principles that I learned that I think can really, hopefully be useful and best practices. So the first one, and I think the most important one, is trust. And this is something that is very intangible and it can be hard to describe. But I'll give 2 stories. So the first story is what trust isn't, what it doesn't look like. So when we were in Burma, we went to a couple co-working spaces and they were saying and sharing that they had a problem because they had this startup competition, but people would actually be pitching fake ideas because they didn't want other people to steal their real idea. So that was an example of what wasn't working in their very early stage ecosystem, and they have a lot of maturing to do. An example of something that really worked was in Cambodia with this collective called Small World, and they essentially were a bunch of different companies and individual startups coming together, and they would just do a bunch of hackathons, skill shares, workshops, and they would even trade their own tools that they were developing. And this was really like a healthy ecosystem in which they just didn't really care about ownership. It was all open source, and they really believed in just collaboration is actually produces better results. And so that was really true, and they are incredible, youthful entrepreneurship group. And so trust is super key and something that Silicon Valley, I think, has inherently been a value. I think it's really the thread of life, the golden thread. Second one is champions, and this idea of leadership is something that is a little different in the West and the East. I think in the East it's a little bit more communal culture, community-driven and consensus-driven. At the same time, the best ecosystems that we found have always a very strong leader. Like they make it their mission in life, live or die, like 24 hours a day, that they're going to make this happen. And so I call them champions. They champion this project and mission with the support of the communal, effort. And that's a really key thing. So an example of that is in Bangkok, our friend Aim, he's a young 23-year-old, and he just decided that he wanted to make the best, he called it hub in Bangkok, to be the place to go if you're a foreigner coming into Asia and you want to start a company. So he became well known for this. He actually went out of his way and he hosted Y Combinator when they came to Bangkok. Y Combinator is the best accelerator program in Silicon Valley. They hosted him in Bangkok, and he basically kind of became well known in the community as being the person to go to talk to and understand what's happening and who should he meet. And this became his life. Like he really dedicated himself to it, and then over 3 years, he basically developed an entire village of about 6 different houses, a food lab, a crafts lab, tech, all sorts of different things in a co-living space, just through his leadership, but also with, obviously the support of the community. I just got back from Naoshima, which is incredible. And I give this example because that's a city that really knew who to partner with. So partnerships are super key. They are absolutely the best leverage point if you really want to scale and also grow your brand awareness, and it leverages itself. And so Naoshima was amazing to witness, with Ando, the architect, the Japanese architect, working with Western artists like Terrell and Monet, and really partnering with the best people in their field, and creating this incredible platform and destination that everyone now knows. As Naoshima, you think of Venice House. So that was an amazing example of a city that really kind of branded itself based on its partnerships. This is an amazing friend of mine, Bing, in Shanghai. And Lineage is a really important thing to him. He kind of became very disillusioned and dissatisfied with how quickly China was developing and crushing a lot of its heritage and culture. and Lineage, a lot of the wisdom and beauty of ancient Chinese culture. And so he's an artist, he's a ceramic artist, those are his vases in the corner. And he basically decided he wanted to um, retain the old Chinese shape, form of the vases, but bring in some modern twist of color and contemporariness that would appeal both to Western buyers and also Chinese buyers. And so he made it his goal and his brand to really merge East and West, but also to really dedicate his work to the ancient traditions and ancient methodologies of creating his work. So lineage is a really important thing, and I always say, or ask people, like, what is your unfair advantage? What is something that only you can really do, and that you are particularly positioned in the world to do? And so that's a really important thing that I've noticed in Japan, is that people do retain their ritual and their traditions, and that's something that people, value highly, and I think should be something that you preserve forever. The fifth principle is permission. So this group of young college students, they're in Changsha in China, and I give this example because there was a company called Broad Group, which is dedicated to sustainability in China, which is an amazing cause. They basically sponsored and bought a building to give to these students to basically just do whatever they wanted. And it was an 8-story building, bare walls, nothing there. And they basically just trusted and gave permission to these young students in the city to just create anything they wanted. And it was this amazing example, and I went there and visited and just was blown away. Like each floor, there was, they built a hostel to house other students to come visit, a food lab, an artist residency, studios, a whole room dedicated to teaching children science. So it was just amazing, and it was an example of what happens when you actually give permission to people. And the last principle is pay it forward. And this is something that is an important part of the cycle of an ecosystem. So in Vietnam, I visited a couple different investors and venture capital firms, and they said that, so Vietnam actually has a pretty mature ecosystem, 10 years old. They have had some successful entrepreneurs who've already built million-dollar companies and are basically cycling back and becoming advisors and mentors to the next generation. And so they've really embraced this concept of everything is cyclical. It's not just, you win and then cash out and then you are good for life. The key to a really healthy ecosystem is where the elders really give back to the newcomers. And they bring all the wisdom and really the industry knowledge, regional knowledge. So it's a really, pay it forward is something that is, as in Silicon Valley, been kind of, it's a rite of passage, and people are proud now to be mentors and advising companies. So coming back to Detroit, I came back from this trip, and I realized that so many of these principles that I learned were essentially the same as in the West, as in Detroit. And it was an amazing just moment for me to realize how much we actually are similar. And so the project I worked on was called Collision Works, and we built this, it's a shipping container that we converted into a storytelling space and also a maker space. And it was all about essentially bringing back the lineage of the maker culture in Detroit and teaching kids and adults skills and having people teach each other. And then also a storytelling space for people to really be vulnerable and share their stories, because the community is pretty racial, has a lot of racial segregation and tension. And so this was a space to create empathy and to really break down barriers and build trust. So the next example of Burning Man. How many of you guys have heard of Burning Man? a fair number of you guys. So I've been to Burning Man since I was 6 years old. I saw it in the early days. I can show you some photos. This was in '96 when you still would hoist up the man together. And then this was, it's much larger now. And the cool thing about Burning Man is that these 10 principles actually are they map really well to my 6 principles around self-reliance, communal effort, expression, being freely expressed. But Burning Man is really an amazing example because it's essentially a city that they build in a week. And there's a lot to learn about how to prototype a city at Burning Man. They literally have 10,000 people come in and construct a city and then get out, and it's like there's no trace. And so in terms of some of the principles, the biggest thing, well, first of all, Burning Man, the kind of back end story is the Lineage, is that it started out of the Cacophony Society, which was basically a performance art group that came in and created this whole portal, this whole other world, alternate reality, and then would leave, and there'd be sort of this time warp reality kind of messing with your head. And so they really built Burning Man out of that lineage. But then the thing that they did that really kind of made it really explode was they gave people permission. So a big thing is that people who go, there's this rule that you can't be a spectator. You can't just sit there and watch. You have to participate. And so they give people permission to really create the experience that they want, and to create a camp and create a community. There's almost like little neighborhoods within the city. And it's all, through the effort of the communal. It's there's literally, you can't just show up and have a good time. It's purely a participatory type of experience. And what you put in is what you get out. And so it's a really good example of, where I think the future of cities are going is we can't just be passive citizens. We have to really participate and be active in voicing what we want, in creating meetups or creating, experiences that embody what we want our cities to be like. So I think the commune is an amazing example of that. This is one other example. So this is a cool space, the Interval, which is owned by the Long Now Foundation, which I've been involved with the last 10 years. And the cool thing about this space is that this was a completely crowdsourced space. So every dollar that went into it was actually paid by the members. It's a membership model. And they also have an amazing lineage. The founders are all people who were involved with the founding of the personal computing movement, the internet revolution. So very Silicon Valley based, but and scientists and inventors, people who are passionate about, how to preserve and also create the future, preserve the past and create the future. And so I'll just show you one more photo. So here, they did a really cool thing. So they crowdsourced all the funds to pay for the space. And then they went even further, and they created this prototyping event where they actually invited their members to come and actually build out a prototype of the physical space in full scale with cardboard. And so you can see them making a sign, and then the founders directing them kind of where to put it. And people are testing it out and seeing what works and what doesn't work. And it was just such an amazing experience of giving people permission to participate, trusting them to really create this experience. And also just, completely it gave people ownership over the space. So it wasn't owned by the foundation anymore. It was owned by every person that was involved. So this is an amazing example of, you can kind of think about if you want to create a city, how would you prototype it? You can build little cardboard models and actually test it out together. Then the last example I wanted to share was, so one of the reasons for coming on the trip was was working with Meetup here in Japan. And Meetup in Japan is a really cool group. The thing that really stood out to me was the level of trust that it involved. You know, people who are complete strangers come together to hang out for a few hours. And in this case, it was doing a tour of around the city, and we went to go see this beautiful Inari? I'm pronouncing it wrong. Anyway, what's the name of the place? Yeah, Meetup is an amazing example of a community that is built on trust and also built on champions. So people who have to champion, you know, a group and take leadership roles. And this woman here in the kimono, she is a tour guide, and she's been to this place like 300 times and gives tours to people. And so it's an amazing community of makers, people who want to practice English, and it's really built on this collaborative, open, trusting platform. And so I'll just wrap, and this is just a summary of the 6 principles here again. That the things that I love about Japan, and I think the things that we can learn so much from you guys. Visited this amazing space in Osaka called Truck. I don't know if you've heard of it. Incredible furniture maker who made it his life's mission to build the best furniture out of organic materials. And so the thing that I just really takes me off guard each time in Japan is your dedication to craft and excellence. And so I think that's something that we have so much to learn from you, especially in America, where we build things to be disposed and to be, you know, just obsolete, you know, completely like made out of trash. So in Japan, I think you guys have this incredible dedication to excellence and to mastery and to putting in the time to mastering a skill. And that's something that I think we have so much to learn from you guys. And then lastly, honoring nature in cities, something that I love and constantly takes me off guard when I go into a cafe and there's a beautiful garden near the cafe, and there's just this integration of public and private space, nature and man-made space that you guys do incredibly well. And I think we have so much to learn from you in our cities about that. So just to wrap, I'm excited to see what emerges in Tokyo and in Shibuya, and I hope that these principles are helpful for you in the future. Thank you.